My daughter is gone. My son-in-law is gone. And my husband and I are sitting in a house that feels like it belongs to strangers. Wondering how two people who thought they were doing the right thing ended up with nothing but silence. And a guest room we're afraid to walk past. I need to say that first, because everything else I'm about to tell you, all the reasons, all the explanations, all the moments where we told ourselves we were being fair, none of it changes that ending. We made our choice. And the person we hurt most has made his. My son-in-law's name was Brendan. That's the word I use now, not because he's dead, but because the version of him that called me mom on holidays, that fixed our back fence without being asked, that drove 3 hours in a February snowstorm to help us when the furnace died. That person is gone. He's alive somewhere in British Columbia, building a new life 800 kilometers away from everything we broke. I know this because his old coworker mentioned it to my husband at a gas station 6 months ago. That's the only update we've gotten in over a year. Our daughter's name is Simone. She's 31. She has her father's ability to cry exactly when it will do her the most good, and she has never in her life been asked to sit in the discomfort of something she caused. That part is on us. Brendan came into our family when Simone was 24. They met through mutual friends at a hockey game in Ottawa, which is the kind of meet cute that sounds made up but wasn't. He was 27. A project manager for a mid-sized construction firm. The kind of man who shows up 15 minutes early and stays 30 minutes late and never mentions either. Quiet. Steady. The sort of person you don't fully appreciate until he's not there anymore. My husband took to him immediately. I was more cautious. Not because of anything specific. Just because Simone had a history of moving fast, and I had a history of picking up the pieces. But Brendan was different. He was patient with her in ways I hadn't seen before. When she spiraled, he didn't spiral with her. When she needed space, he gave it. When she needed to be pulled back from the edge of a bad decision, he did that too, gently, without making her feel small. They got engaged after 3 years. Was small, on a property outside Kingston, late September, when the maples were just starting to turn. I remember thinking, standing next to my husband during the ceremony, that we had gotten lucky. That Simone had found someone who would take care of her in all the ways we had struggled to. I don't know exactly when it started. I've replayed it so many times that the timeline has blurred. But I think it was about 2 years into the marriage. Simone had quit her job at the marketing agency. Her third job in 4 years. And was trying to launch a freelance design business from home. Brendan was supportive. He took on extra hours to cover the gap while she got established. He converted the spare bedroom into a proper studio for her. He learned enough about her software to help trouble where she got stuck. The business didn't take off the way she'd hoped. She had talent. Genuine talent, but she had trouble with the parts that weren't creative. Invoicing. Following up with clients. Setting boundaries around her time. Brendan helped with that too, for a while. Then he stopped being able to help. Because the problems weren't logistical anymore. They were something else. She started spending more time with a man I'll call her creative partner. They had connected online, bonded over similar aesthetics, started collaborating on pitches. He had a studio in Gatineau. She started going there 3-4 times a week. She called it professional development. Brendan called it something different, eventually, and he was right. The night Brendan found out, he didn't come to us first. He sat with it alone for almost 2 weeks. I know this now. I didn't know it then. When he finally showed up at our door on a Tuesday evening in March, he had aged in a way I couldn't quite account for. Not tired. Something deeper than tired. He sat at our kitchen table. My husband made tea that nobody drank, and he told us what had happened. Quietly, without dramatics, the way he did everything. And then he said something I have never been able to forget. He said, "I'm telling you because you deserve to know. What you do with it is your decision. But I need you to understand what you're deciding." Then he left. My husband and I sat at that table for a long time after. And I wish I could tell you that our first thought was about Brendan. I wish I could tell you we immediately called him back. Told him we were on his side. That what Simone had done was wrong, and he didn't deserve it. But our first thought, mine and my husband's, both, and we have never been fully honest with each other about this until recently. Our first thought was about Simone. Not Simone the person. Simone the situation. What this would mean for her. Whether the marriage could be saved. What people would think. Whether her business could survive. If this became known in their social circle. Whether the house they'd bought together 18 months earlier would have to be sold. We called her that night, she cried. She said it had been a mistake, that she loved Brendan. That it was over with the other man. She said she needed time. She said she needed us. And then she said the thing that I have turned over in my mind 1,000 times since. She said, "Please don't make this worse." We took that to mean, don't take sides. Don't push Brendan towards something permanent. Give her a chance to fix it. We should have asked. Worse for whom? We reached out to Brendan the next day. We told him we loved him. We told him we were not excusing what had happened. And then, this is the part I can barely say out loud. We asked him to consider the impact that a separation would have on Simone's mental health, on her business, on the family as a whole. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I understand." 2 words, flat, and he hung up. We thought he was processing. We thought he understood that we were trying to hold things together, not minimize what he'd been through. We convinced ourselves that asking him to pause, to think, to give her a chance. That was the loving thing to do. The wise thing. The thing a good family does. We were not a good family. We were a comfortable one. There's a difference. Simone came home to Brendan. They went to couples counseling. 2 months passed, then 3. On the surface, things seemed to stabilize. Brendan was quieter than before, more internal, but we told ourselves that was healing. That was a man rebuilding trust. That was normal. What it actually was, we found out later, was a man realizing he was completely alone. Because every time he'd reached for support. From us, from Simone's parents, from the 2 people in the world who were supposed to be his family too. We had handed him a brochure for reconciliation instead. He tried once more. About 4 months after the initial conversation, he called my husband directly. He said counseling wasn't working. He said he didn't feel safe in his own home. He said he needed to know whether we actually supported him, or whether we were supporting the idea of keeping the marriage intact. My husband told him we supported both of them equally. That we hoped they could find a way through. Brendan thanked him and hung up. 6 weeks later, he filed for divorce. He didn't tell us first. We found out when Simone called, screaming into the phone, at 11 in the morning on a Wednesday, saying she didn't understand, that she thought things were getting better, that Brendan had blindsided her. What I didn't say, what I couldn't say in that moment was, did you really not see this coming? Or did you just assume, the way you've always assumed, that the consequences would be for someone else? The divorce moved quickly. Brendan had a lawyer. He had documentation. I later understood he'd kept records of everything, dates, conversations, the works. Their separation agreement was finalized in under 5 months, which is fast for Ontario. And Simone later told me in a moment of bitterness that she'd been blindsided by how prepared he was. He wasn't blindsided. He'd been planning his exit since that second phone call with my husband. He'd already seen who we were going to be. After the divorce, Simone moved back in with us for 8 months. This is where I should tell you it was difficult but manageable. That we rallied as a family. That Simone grew from the experience. The truth is, it was the hardest 8 months of my marriage. Not because of Simone's grief. That part was real and I held it. But because of everything underneath the grief. The sense of entitlement that surfaced when there was no longer a steady, patient man, absorbing the impact of her choices. The expectation that our home would function as Brendan had. Seamlessly, quietly, without her having to ask or acknowledge or reciprocate. She went through his contact in her phone and sent a message asking to talk. He didn't respond. She sent another, still nothing. She asked us to reach out on her behalf. We did. God help us, we did. Brendan's reply to my message was 3 sentences. He said he wished us well. He said he needed us to respect his decision not to have contact. He said he hoped Simone would be okay. He said nothing about us. He didn't say he'd miss us. He didn't say he was angry. He just stepped around us, the way you step around something on the sidewalk that you don't want to track inside. That was the moment I started to understand the size of what we'd done. Simone eventually moved out. She's in a condo in Barrie now, back to full-time work. A different agency, new city, fresh start. She calls us twice a week. She's doing better, I think. She went to therapy, genuinely this time, not as a gesture. She's grown in ways I can see. But she's never said the words. Not directly. Not the "I destroyed my marriage and put my parents in the middle and expected them to hold the weight of it" version. She's gotten close. There was a conversation over Christmas, just her and me at the kitchen table while my husband slept, where she said, "I know I wasn't fair to Brendan." But she stopped there, and I didn't push. Because I am her mother and some part of me still, even now, cannot bear to watch her have to fully sit with it. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's always been the problem. My husband got sick last spring. Nothing life-threatening, but serious enough that it required surgery and a 6-week recovery. It's the kind of event that reshapes your sense of what matters. You lie awake at 3 in the morning, and you take inventory of your life and you try to figure out when exactly you made the decisions that led you here. I thought about Brendan constantly during those 6 weeks. Not romantically, not with longing, with something more like grief. I thought about how, if he were still in our lives, he would have been there without being asked. He would have driven my husband to the hospital. He would have shown up with food, taken out the recycling, made sure the medications were sorted. Not because someone told him to. Just because that was who he was. We didn't have that. We had Simone, who visited when she could, and called every day and tried her best. And we had neighbors who were kind. But the absence of him, the absence of the person we'd failed when it mattered, was something I felt in a very specific physical way. I wrote him a letter in September. Handwritten, mailed to his last known address, which I found through a combination of memory and guessing. I told him I was sorry. Not for the marriage ending. That wasn't mine to apologize for. But for the way we'd spoken to him when he came to us. For asking him to consider Simone's well-being, when we should have been asking about his. For the phone call my husband made where we said we supported both of them equally, which was, in retrospect, a way of saying we supported the situation more than we supported him. I told him he deserved better from us. I told him I hoped he was well. I don't know if the letter reached him. I don't know if he read it. I haven't heard back, and I'm not expecting to. My husband and I talk about it differently now than we used to. For a long time there was a version of the story we told ourselves where we were caught in the middle. Where we had to balance the needs of both sides. Where our intentions were good. Even if the outcome wasn't. That version was comfortable. That version let us sleep. The version we tell now is harder. We weren't in the middle. We were on a side. We just didn't want to admit it. Because admitting it meant admitting that we had asked a man who came to us in pain to sacrifice more of himself for our family's comfort. He warned us. He stood in our kitchen and he said, "I need you to understand what you're deciding." And we nodded and we made tea and then we decided anyway. There's a photograph on the bookshelf in the living room. Our daughter's wedding. Brendan and Simone, her in cream linen, him in a gray suit, both of them laughing at something off camera. My husband suggested we put it away after the divorce. I said no, not to punish anyone, not to keep hope alive. I kept it because I think we need to see it. I think we need to remember what it looked like when someone trusted us with something that mattered. We didn't protect it. We protected ourselves. And called it protecting our family, and lost both things in the process. The guest room still has the quilt his mother made for them as a wedding gift. Simone left it here when she moved out. I don't know what to do with it. Returning it feels like too much, after all this time. Throwing it away feels like erasing something we don't have the right to erase. So it sits there. In a room nobody uses. In a house that got very quiet in ways we didn't expect, after a choice we told ourselves was made with love. This is what we chose. This is what choosing looks like, when it finally settles in.